Hey everyone, I hope you're well. This is the story about what if Naruto could manipulate iron sand. Before we start, please subscribe to the channel and like the video as well. So without any further ado, let's start the what if. Naruto sighed at the farm before he performed several seals. Sand along the length of the field burst across the length, tilling the ground it scraped across. A jet of sand moved between Hinata's legs. Her eyes looked through the tilled dirt and started throwing seeds into the rows of dirt in long lines, making sure that each seed penetrated a few centimeters into the ground. Sasuke chuckled before he looked at the long trench made for irrigation. His eyes turned red and the pupils swirled inside their iris. Several seals passed through Sasuke's hands before he exhaled a long stream of water. The irrigation ditch corralled the water into the new rows. The water finally sank into the earth. Alright guys, let's try and get that stupid pump thing working now. Naruto shouted over his shoulder while running along the farm. Sand collected itself at his feet in a long sifting sound. The blonde stopped at a corner and sand pooled into his clothes and melded with his fading tan. Hinata sighed before sitting down. Let's do it after lunch, Naruto-kun. I think we deserve to eat after all of that. Sasuke chuckled before he pulled out their pack. For all of our talk, we didn't really do anything. We just planned all morning. We actually planted everything in 7 minutes. Hinata looked around. Satisfied Kakashi-sensei or their employer was around, she stuck her tongue out at Sasuke. Naruto laughed loudly before setting down with the bento Hinata made. The three were discussing how the water pump worked around octopus-shaped rice balls when a soft wind settled next to them. All the shouted with full mouths, "You're late." Kakashi smiled at the three before turning his gaze over to the farmland that had been freshly plowed and seeded. Well done. That just leaves the water pump and we can return back to Konoha by the end of the day. Well done, you three. The three kids smiled widely. The mission was planned to last for 3 days, and they had successfully got most of it done by noon. By the time the group was ready for dinner, they had all decided to hold off on it until they arrived back in Konoha. The sky had already darkened by several shades when the group arrived at their home village. Sasuke stretched, Hinata yawned, and Naruto's stomach reminded them they had not eaten yet. He grinned sheepishly before they entered the barbecue beef restaurant closest to their gate. Their sensei Kakashi Heikate smiled at the three children while they talked and ate. "That's not what I said, Sasuke, and you know it," cried Naruto. "Yes, it is. You said you will buy us barbecue if one of us could out-eat you." "I did. Now, pay up." Naruto growled while Hinata laughed. The smiling eyes of their teacher only looked up when a man arrived behind Sasuke wearing a white boar mask. The man handed a letter to Sasuke and whispered it something into his ear. "Naruto, we know you have the money, why is it so hard to pay?" Naruto pointedly ignored the Ayanbu. "It would mean I lost." Hinata giggled before she said, "But you did lose, he ate 3 more pieces of beef than you." Naruto groaned before submitting. The Uchiha nodded at the Anbu's words before stuffing the letter into his shirt and glancing at Naruto while continuing the three's conversation. At Sasuke's glance, Naruto tilted his head to their teacher and he disappeared and headed towards the entrance. Sasuke Hinata had hurried up to finish their meals. At the trill of a bird, Sasuke, Hinata, and Naruto left the barbecue and walked down the streets of Konoha. The two boys walked Hinata to her compound and she smiled at them both and they wordlessly nodded that they would tell her everything in the morning. The two boys looked at each other before they broke into a sprint and headed straight to the Uchiha compound. The boys knew that their sensei went to confirm the origin of the letter. When they were safely inside, Sasuke handed the letter to Naruto. Naruto recognized Gaara's small scrawl and opened the rolled scroll. A smaller paper rolled out when he opened it fully and it rested on the floor. Naruto read the letter Gaara sent him and gave a silent sigh before putting it away. He squatted and picked up the second letter and stared at it, not daring to read it. Gaara had said it was a random letter that Temari had not sent to him. Naruto jerked his head up and saw an attentive Sasuke staring at him. Naruto chuckled nervously before putting away the letter Temari-chan sent him. I need to speak with the Hokage. Gaara ran into some trouble, and I need some help with what he told me. Sasuke looked at him. The happy boy the Uchiha knew was absent. In his place was a confident child who was a complete ninja. Sasuke started to follow the blonde when he left the house, but Naruto turned around and stopped him with a raised hand. Sorry, but I have to do this alone. Sasuke looked at him confused before he remembered that Naruto was already a few levels above him. Sasuke looked apprehensive about leaving his friend alone at night but went back inside and turned on the radio while he started to sharpen his weapons. Naruto smiled slightly before he turned into sand and reappeared in front of the Hokage tower. He walked up mindful that while the old man might have gone home, Tsunade Abakan will still be there drinking. After several flights of stairs he stood in front of the Hokage offices and heard talking. After hesitating for a moment he walked in and looked over to his sensei. He was standing at attention. Tsunade watched Naruto walk in and she smiled at his surprise that she was not drunk. He stood next to his sensei and pulled out a letter. Abakan, I have a problem. He gave her the letter. Tsunade looked at the front and back before reading. Naruto, I ran into another member of those guys we fought in the capital. The real strong one. I am fine, but they are after all of the tailed demon containers. They came after me a few weeks ago, and just remembered that they would try and get you too. Be careful. You know these guys are strong. And I think that blue-faced guy, Kisame, might go after you since he didn't show up here. Oh, and Temari misses you. I grabbed one of the letters she is too scared to send and am sending it over. Gaara. Tsunade looked up at Naruto to elaborate. When I was on a mercenary mission with Gaara we met up with a man who tried to kill Daimyo-san. Kisame left when he said he knew me. We fought her, he kicked me around then said he would come back when Gaara showed up to help me. Gaara said he met someone who is friends with Kisame a little while ago and that Kisame will be coming back for me soon. Tsunade listened to the story and looked down to the letter again. I have spoken with Kakashi about this, and we were able to retrieve a report of that incident after searching through the summary reports Suna had sent us in part of our friendly exchange clause. Tsunade smiled at the boy's confusion but kept going. The man was named Sasori of the Red Sands. A missing nin from their own village. We gathered, in part to an old friend, that they are a part of a group called the Akatsuki. The Red Dawn? Naruto asked while sounding out the name. Tsunade nodded. While my friend didn't know their goals, it seems your friend Gaara found out the hard way. At this point I am going to send your team out on a rank C mission. This is to give you some breathing room while I handle the council and more time for us to prepare for such a high-class ninja coming to Konoha. At the moment besides Ayanbu who are always patrolling the country, there are only 5 jonin that are currently in the village and only one of those is without students. Tsunade looked at Kakashi-sensei. It will take a while to prepare and apprehend and question this Kisame. Naruto nodded in understanding. In the Sand Village, he had to get used to understanding what the elders said or risk getting into trouble. It was easy to fall into that routine while listening to the old woman talk. Tsunade nodded once and Naruto's sensei cleared his throat. Naruto, tell the others that we will meet tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. at the South Gate. I'll be on time, just this once. Naruto looked up at his teacher in surprise for declaring his punctuality. Naruto returned late and walked into the house already knowing that Sasuke was asleep. Naruto stretched from the long C-ranked mission they did all day and went to bed. He had to wake up a little earlier than usual to explain everything to his team. Naruto woke up and stretched before he immediately went into the bathroom to shower. When he got out he saw Sasuke standing at the door still not quite awake but ready to enter to get ready for whatever got Naruto up and about. While Sasuke was in the shower, Naruto finished getting dressed with his hide muffler that wrapped around his neck and shoulders and a pair of pants that were black with the orange lines that followed the seams. Naruto playfully messed with his hair at the mirror next to the door with his still damp hair before leaving. His head protector pressed around his neck when his feet burst with speed out the door. Naruto jumped over roofs and cleared streets before landing in front of the Hyuga compound. He ran in and waved at the guards, who merely looked at him once before returning their gazes back to the front. Naruto ran down the main street and jumped over the gated fence that housed Hinata's family. Naruto leaped onto a tree and over to the roof. His feet tack-tacked as he ran, and the blonde only stopped at Hinata's window. He walked over the ledge and let his feet stick to the side of the wall. He grinned evilly when he saw she was still asleep. Naruto squatted, stuck his head into the girl's room. He moved one hand to cup his mouth and said in a whisper, "Hinata." The girl stirred slightly. "Hinata." Naruto repressed the giggle and walked into the room, quietly minding where he was walking on the ceiling. When he was directly over her head, he looked straight down at her. "Hinata." Sasuke was captured by his fan club again. Hinata ripped her eyes open and sat up. "Those bastards!" She promptly placed her hand around her mouth and looked to her bedroom door. After a moment of not having her father walk in, she exhaled before she looked around. A second later, she heard snickering and looked up. She screamed in shock and fell back onto her sleeping mat. "Naruto, get out." Okay," he said after laughing loudly. "Get dressed and meet us at Sasuke's, we got another away mission." He smiled brightly at her and left the room. Naruto leapt over the guards who had run towards the main branch home. When Naruto passed the garden, he noticed that Hyuga Hayashi looked at the boy. Naruto grinned widely at the leader. Hinata's father turned away, but Naruto caught the tug of a smile at the man's mouth. Hinata arrived at the boys' home 20 minutes later, still fuming at Naruto's latest prank. Her glare triggered fits of laughter from the boys before Naruto dragged them to the south gate. When Hinata looked at the boys, Sasuke shrugged his shoulders, still not knowing why they were there. When both looked at Naruto, he shook his head in a no. Hinata looked at the sun, and it was just barely coming up from the mountain. She pulled out her pocket watch, and the three kids sighed at the Hinata's timepiece. It was 5 minutes till 6, and there was no sign of their teacher. Naruto stood watching over the clock for 3 more minutes, and it was finally Sasuke who asked, "Why are you staring at the clock?" Kakashi-sensei said he would be on time. Both kids sat up at this and stood next to him, staring at the clock. The second hand passed over the 12 again, and it was down to 1 more minute. "You don't really think he will show up on time, will you?" Hinata said while staring at the clock. "I don't know, but if he would stop reading his books, you would think he would arrive on time," Sasuke commented. Naruto tapped the clock as it rounded the 6. "What do you think that book is anyway?" Both of his teammates shrugged at each other before they looked back down at the clock. The second hand passed the 12, signaling 6 o'clock. "I knew it." Naruto grounded out in irritation. "Knew what, Naruto?" The 3 kids all jumped and turned around to find Kakashi watching them with amusement. All 3 looked back to the clock and sighed. No one saw him arrive on time. "Let's get going, I'll explain when we are a good distance away," Kakashi said seriously. The 3 genin followed their teacher. Tsunade set down her tea and folded her hands in front of her face. "That is the situation. I'll let you deliberate on the next course of action, but I feel that I should stress the need for a quick and responsible decision, and not one that I will veto upon seeing it the first time." The elder man and woman nodded and bowed to both Kages before leaving the room. "Those 2. Tsunade sighed while rubbing her head. "They are good people, Tsunade. You should trust that Hamura and Koharu." Tsunade simply took another sip of tea. She knew she would be drinking it all morning. Naruto remained serious for the entire time of their run. Kakashi would have them stop for several moments before picking a new direction. Sasuke recognized the use of a genjutsu that he placed behind them. He wondered what it meant, but when he thought to raise his voice, the tense air from both their sensei and their usually relaxed friend made him hold his tongue. Finally, after several changes in directions, the 4 stood on top of a mountain path. Naruto looked out behind them and both Sasuke and Hinata took a seat on the rocks to regain their breath. They both knew that Naruto had been conditioned to handle such long runs, but they also knew that it was also in part because he was a demon container. This is a dual mission Team Kakashi. All three kids looked at their sensei. We are to track down a bandit who has been disrupting trade over this route. Kakashi adjusted his mouth mask and looked over to the path ahead of them. From this point we are to henge into traveling traders and capture the bandit. The second half of this mission is a little more complicated. Kakashi looked at Naruto, who nodded his approval. The teacher exhaled. Right now, there is an S-ranked missing nin who is hunting Naruto. When Hinata gave a confused look on her face, Naruto spoke up. A missing nin is a person who abandoned their village and is an outlaw. Kisame's rank is similar to how missions are ranked. Both Sasuke and Hinata had their breath hitched at the information. Kakashi gauged both the two inexperienced genins' reaction. This mission is to send us away and make it difficult for the missing nin Hashige Kisame from tracking us. It will also give the village time to prepare to capture and interrogate the man. The group nodded before each placed their hands in identical seals. The three children looked around for a few moments and nodded to their sensei. Each student was disguised as an adult carrying many heavy bags. The four set out on the long trail as it wound through the countryside to the capital of Fire Country. Several hours passed and the group sat down for rest, each making a subtle display of their campsite. It was then that Kakashi realized he forgot about something as simple as the problem he now had. Only Sasuke knew how to effectively use genjutsus. And even then, the young Uchiha did not know how to start this illusion, much less maintain it. "Think you will sleep better now, Soki?" Kakashi said with a wide smile. Sasuke looked at his teacher. "I mean, you didn't sleep real well last night, your eyes were all red this morning." Naruto and Hinata listened carefully but still went about their business. Sasuke smiled. "It is nothing, I already told you I was just allergic to that food." Well, I'll be sure to watch what I cook tonight. I guess boar and chicken are out. But the way you are so picky, I wonder if rat meat will be any better. But I still think anything is good if there is enough fire." Sasuke gave his teacher a look, deciding that he didn't like the way he was being seen as. "I am sure I can handle whatever you can dish out." Kakashi smiled while knelt next to the fire that Hinata and Naruto had started. "Thanks for the fire, Ruri. Since I won the bet, me and Soki get 2 servings. Looks like you two will be left out of the good stuff." Naruto gave his teacher a look but just pretended to growl. When night fell, the four bid each other good night and went into their genjutsu tents. When Sasuke was sure he was ready, he opened his eyes and saw how the genjutsu worked with his Sharingan. It was different from the ones he had seen before, as it was all based on nothing. This was opposed to as all the genjutsus he has done where illusions were focused on objects or people. After remembering the order of the hand signals, his hands went through them. Boar, rooster, rat. Sasuke smiled at the last one, as it was the same for all fire techniques. Tiger. The young boy let the illusion waver for a half a second before he held it firmly in place. He smiled to himself before Kakashi walked into the tent illusion. "That's good, Sasuke. I just had to make sure that both Hinata and Naruto knew that they had no guard duty tonight. I'll sleep for 3 hours and relieve you. If you have problems or need to raise the alarm, just kick my bag." That brought a small smile to Sasuke's lips before he nodded in affirmative. Kakashi looked at the other 2 teammates and knew he would have to work on their illusionary skills so this kind of problem wouldn't happen on another mission. And that is their decision. While their current mission is not in danger of being breached, Sarutobi and I believe that it would be best to have another Jonin on their mission. "Hi, Hokage-sama. I have already rested and am ready to leave now." The Jonin gave the 2 a toothy grin. "Then, go." The man saluted and disappeared. Sarutobi looked at Tsunade in amusement. "May I ask why you chose him?" "He is the only non-Anbu Jonin we have that we can spare." Sarutobi smiled before placing his pipe back in his mouth. Tsunade smiled. And those two are good friends. I know that they have their sore spots, but they work well together. If the Akatsuki do find them, those two could handle Kisame. Sarutobi continued smiling as Tsunade took another cup of tea and drank. The ninja group sighed in exasperation. They had arrived at the capital and there was no sign of the bandit. The four were forced to stay a day before heading back out. The rain was coming down as they entered town and Kakashi wanted to show Naruto and Hinata the technique Sasuke used when they slept so they could all participate in guard duty. Sasuke smiled while he lay on his bed and slept. It took a lot of chakra to keep his Sharingan on for several hours and maintain an unfamiliar jutsu, but then, he had also said it was good training. Kakashi gave them some money and the three kids found themselves in the main section of town after the rain broke. This place is a lot different than the capital of Wind Country. Hinata looked at the blonde. What's different? Naruto chuckled while he jumped into a large puddle. Well, there's water here. Hinata shrieked as water hit her legs. She started to walk towards Naruto, who laughed and turned to run. The three kids meandered through the town's folk and finally stopped in front of a bookstore. Sasuke raised his eyebrows before pointed at the window. Hey guys, look. All three looked at the window and there stood a large display of a book titled Ika Ika Paradise 3. Hinata saw it and grinned. Now we can know what it is he's reading. The three kids ran into the store and went around the glass case to the display. A balding man with a blue shirt spied them and shouted. Hey! Kids, get out of there, those books are for adults only. All three kids froze. They were inches from touching the books. Hinata was curious enough to where she was tempted to borrow one of the copies but decided against it. The three left the bookstore empty-handed. Naruto gave a disappointing look before he brightened up. I figured out what we can do for the rest of the day. His teammates looked at him as his grinned face turned sinister. Kakashi was sitting in his hotel room and chuckling to himself. His newest book Ika Ika Paradise sat comfortably in his hand while his usual Ika Ika Paradise Vala sat in his jacket. Sasuke walked into the room with a towel around his neck. Sensei, did you want to come with us while we go to the hot springs? Kakashi looked up from his book and twisted his neck until it popped. He looked back at the book and set it in his pocket. Sure, just give me a moment. Sasuke nodded and waited outside. Kakashi emerged from his room and looked at Naruto and Sasuke. His face was hiding behind his open book. Both boys looked at him in curiosity now that they both realized they had never seen his face. Kakashi looked at the two. What happened to Hinata? Naruto turned red. I got her mad at me. Kakashi smiled while the three left the hotel. What did you do? Naruto laughed and Sasuke repressed a chuckle. I just showed her the difference between the capital of Wind Country and Fire Country. Kakashi looked at him. Naruto just grinned and sand flaked off his cheek. I think she is still in her room getting the sand out of her clothes. Their sensei chuckled and the three entered the bathhouse. Hinata followed the three with her Byakugan until they entered the bathhouse. She didn't need the distraction about being able to see them inside. She jumped through Kakashi-sensei's window and she carefully shuffled through her teacher's things until she found 3 books. She was surprised that their teacher likes to read so much. The Hyuga grabbed the one that matched the book she carried with her. She took off the jacket cover and slid it on her fake book before jumping out of the window and stuffing the book in her room. Now that she had it, she started to think how she could do the next part. Naruto had a wet rag on his head and his body submerged up to his chin in hot spring water. He gave out a happy sigh. Kakashi tilted his head towards the entrance and smiled slightly. Naruto! Sasuke! Get your asses out here right now! Naruto slipped underwater for a second before looking at Sasuke. The Uchiha looked as scared as the blonde felt. You two are going to pay for that little stunt. Get out! Here! Now! Kakashi laughed and looked at the boys. What did you do to her now? Naruto gave an anxious laugh. I kinda left some. You two better get out here now or I am coming in. Told you it wasn't a good idea. Sasuke said from the corner. 1. Both Genin looked at each other before they ran. 2. Hinata was bright red. She didn't realize how much attention she would be attracting. She prayed that her being red would show that she was angry. She couldn't bring herself to last anymore and ran inside. She poked her head into the men's spa and saw her sensei and promptly epped and turned bright right. Kakashi smiled from under his book and pointed to the direction of over the fence. Hinata ran into the spa and over the fence as fast as she could. Kakashi smiled and went back to reading his new book. Hinata was bright red and covered her face with her hands. I have never been so embarrassed before. Naruto was laughing hysterically and Sasuke exhaled. I've never been that scared in my life. You were really convincing, Hinata-chan. Hinata, if possible, turned redder. Naruto recovered and looked at her expectantly. She grinned back and pulled out the book. I wanted to have us all look together. Naruto and Sasuke huddled close to Hinata, who relaxed slightly until they both placed an arm around her to keep themselves from falling off the bed. Hinata gingerly opened the book and the three started reading. 4 pages later Sasuke fell back with blood gushing from his nose. Hinata didn't think it was possible to have so much blood in her face. They both looked away from the book and looked at Naruto, who hadn't said a word since they opened the book. Naruto's face was twisted in concentrated look. Finally, after taking hold of the book and reading a bit more, he finally sighed. Both Hinata and Sasuke were waiting to see what he was going to say. Naruto looked at his friends. I don't get it. Both children fell flat onto the bed. Sasuke looked at his blonde friend. I envy you. No, wait, explain it to me, what is this? Hinata. What's this crevice they keep talking about? Sasuke was confused slightly by that part too and looked at Hinata, who just stayed quiet and very red. Naruto finally skipped several pages ahead and finally read, or rather saw, something he could understand. It was a picture of a very naked woman and suffixes for sounds of moaning. Gah! This is a pervy book. Naruto looked at his friend expecting them to have the same reaction, only to see them look at him with amazement. What? Hinata finally said, but does that mean he is reading this stuff all the time? I mean, he has 4 different books with him. Are they all pervy books? She looked downcast. Sasuke looked at the book. So our teacher is a pervert. Naruto looked at the book and his eyes began to tear up childishly. He looked at the sky and said, our teacher is a pervert. Kakashi entered Hinata's hotel room and knew something was wrong. He knocked on the open door and looked in. Is everything alright in here? An orange book flew at his face. He caught it and gave a slight chuckle noise at being discovered. Are you all upset? He rounded the corner of the small hallway and saw all 3 children glaring at him. Sensei, we lost faith in you. Naruto shouted while pointing at him. Sasuke gave a HMMPH in scorn and Hinata couldn't look at him. After a moment Kakashi brightened. So whose idea was it to pull off such a good distraction? All 3 kids pointed at each other. Kakashi smiled. It was very good. I didn't even think of anything else but the boy's impending doom. His only showing I turned up in a smile. The 3 smiled slightly, but Naruto caught himself and humphed. Come on team. Ramen. On me. Where Sasuke and Hinata were finally able to look at their sensei, Naruto looked at him with joy. Ramen. Naruto grabbed his teammates' hands and dragged them out of the door, following their teacher, not noticing the half-hearted irritated looks they gave him. Naruto led the group under a henge through the route. He was running off of a full stomach of ramen and was feeling good that he was able to convince his team that ramen was a decent breakfast. Kakashi exchanged amused glances Hinata and Sasuke. It was 4 hours until they found a single man standing in the center of the road. Naruto was about to open his mouth to ask the man a question as they approached him. They saw the man charge them with a sword in hand. Naruto looked at the man and ran back to the group. He still kept his disguise on and looked at his teammates, who both moved forward. Several kicks and punches later, Sasuke melted the sword with a fire jutsu, and Hinata was satisfied that the man would not wake for the remainder of the day thanks to her yet unnamed fighting style. Kakashi looked at the two genin and nodded at their work. How was he compared to ninja? Sasuke looked at the man and thought about how he fought. He was fast. He was experienced with the sword. It is only because of my Sharingan that I was able to avoid getting cut. Kakashi nodded before looking at Hinata. He lacked the chakra needed to perform jutsu, but even so, he could have been dangerous to anyone who was not familiar with how ninja worked. He was able to make several attempts to misdirect us and leave openings for us to be counterattacked. Kakashi smiled and nodded at their assessment. Good. He looked at Naruto and smiled at the young boy. Good call there, Naruto. These two need this kind of experience. Naruto smiled. The blonde turned to the unconscious man and sand wrapped around him. It lifted him and the unconscious bandit began to follow the group as they headed their way back to Konoha. The group had just passed an Anbu checkpoint where Kakashi notified the Anbu soldier to go ahead and notify that Team Kakashi was heading home. The man was gone quickly and Kakashi looked around still anxious until they were safely back in Konoha. Suddenly, Sasuke stopped. He felt a cold sweat roll of his forehead. We have been by here before. Naruto saw a small mound of sand. He looked back at the man he was carrying and nodded. My sand wouldn't have fallen off on the way up here. It was solid the whole time. It must have loosened while I was carrying this guy. Kakashi already had his headband up and looking around with his Sharingan. Sasuke followed him. It was Hinata that noticed it first. Get out of the way. The ground below them glowed for a moment before it disappeared. Naruto stood on a tree and saw that his team made it as well. He gasped when he had forgotten about the bandit. The man's body was sandblasted from the explosion. Naruto recognized a dead body when he saw it. Naruto looked around and recognized that laugh. Kisame, where are you? Mist rolled into the area unnaturally fast. Naruto gave an old swear that Gaara would have reprimanded him for. Sasuke looked around and felt comfort that Hinata was next to him. Her Byakugan was searching through the fog. I can't see. It's too thick. She whispered to him. Sasuke nodded before he pulled her out of the way of a kunai that flew over her head. Sasuke looked at the kunai and realized that it was not meant to hit him. His Sharingan eyes looked around. Several hand seals and he moved his mouth to the sky. Katan, Gakakyu no Jutsu, a large fireball flew through the air and dissipated some of the fog. Sasuke and Hinata ran into the remaining fog knowing that if the technique didn't wipe out the entire jutsu they would just make themselves a target. Kakashi looked around carefully. He could sense his students and was worried, although he was sad to admit he was more worried about Sasuke and Hinata. The Jonin turned around with kunai in hand and deflected another kunai. A man in black robes, with red clouds, stood in front of him wearing a bamboo hat. You are a member of the Akatsuki? You presume much, Kakashi-sensei. Kakashi felt a moment of surprise before he calmed himself. He may not have been able to recognize the man's hidden face and eyes, but he knew that voice as it was one of the few that were ingrained in his heart. His greatest failure. Uchiha Itachi. Why have you shown up now? Kakashi thought of his students. From the reports, he had assumed that there would be only one Akatsuki sent. It was a potentially fatal error. I am here to see. Kakashi closed his only normal eye and started back at the man. My brother truly showed his potential. To come this far so soon. He will surpass you. I don't even think I know how far he can go. He is free of your taint, Itachi. There is nothing that clouds his judgment. Itachi paused the movement of his hand that would complete a jutsu. It was interesting that his brother could do anything other than think of avenging the Uchiha clan. Itachi made sure to ingrain it into his little brother before leaving the accursed village. Kakashi stared at the man as the fog began to break slightly. I wasn't there to witness when, but he was saved by his friends. Even right now, they are saving him. And he is saving them. You only serve to make him stronger. Itachi smiled at the words. He turned to leave. He paused for a second before raising his left hand towards Kakashi. It would be rude to not leave a parting gift. Naruto saw the kunai fly at his friends but was relieved when they avoided it. Kisame. The shark man chuckled and thinned the mist. Can you find me now, Naruto-chan? Naruto growled. Sand burst from his body when a sword fell to deliver a strike. Kisame grinned next to him. I am disappointed. You didn't remember. Naruto's sand began to crumble from the sudden drain of chakra that the sword was creating. Suddenly Naruto turned into sand and fell into a small pile. Kisame jumped into the air in time to see sand mist gripping his feet. Kisame whistled. That was good. Naruto felt frustrated. He didn't think he would have to show this to his friends so soon. I am sorry. Red chakra enveloped his body. Sand wrapped around him and the red chakra began to scorch the sand black. The mist was blown away from the sudden chakra mass that enveloped Naruto. Sasuke and Hinata looked over to the light and were shocked to see Naruto half-crouched. His body was enveloped in a kind of bubble of red chakra. It was only as it took the shape of an animal with long eats and a single tail that they realized it was the Kyuubi's chakra. They both saw Naruto's blood-red eyes and Naruto tried not to study their looks. He focused on Kisame. One hand rose up and a red chakra hand flew towards the Akatsuki member. Kisame dodged instinctively, knowing he would not want to absorb that chakra. Kisame increased his speed and appeared in front of Naruto. Kisame's sword delivered a powerful blow that lifted Naruto off his feet. Blood splattered Naruto's clothes while the long gash across Naruto's stomach mended in midair. Naruto's chakra tail helped him gain balance and he landed on his legs. Kisame looked at his sword and put it away. It would be useless in this fight. Kisame went through several hand seals and a jet of water erupted from mid-air, draining the mist from the air. Naruto was again thrown off his feet and through several trees before stopping and standing his ground through the remainder of the jutsu. Naruto wiped blood from his mouth. In spite of the armor and the chakra skin, he could not feel his left arm. It was completely numb and likely broken in several places. He flung it out and felt the bones mend. Kisame rushed the boy and kicked him into the air. Several clones appeared in the air and Naruto was surprised that each one delivered a powerful punch, juggling him in the air. Angrily, a chakra limb hit one of the clones only to find it turn into water. Naruto growled before he finally crashed into the ground. He stood up unsteadily and felt exhausted even though he lasted in the Kyuubi state for longer. Kisame's attack became more brutal since he summoned the Kyuubi's power. Just surviving those hits made him exhausted. Naruto gathered himself for one more defense. He couldn't think of a counter-attack. He saw chakra-infused water blast at him in the same technique Kisame first used on him a year ago. Naruto smiled slightly at the thought. There was a black blur and the water exploded in front of him. Naruto felt the Kyuubi chakra recede and he felt his body lay helplessly on the ground. Naruto raised his head to see a man in deep forest green suit and black trimmed hair. His powerful jaw turned upwards him. You may rest now, spirited genin. The beautiful beast of Konoha has arrived. Madogai smiled with perfect teeth. It is customary to identify yourself when someone makes introductions. Kisame gave a feral grin. My name is Hashige Kisame. Madogai smiled widely and dashed towards the swordsman. Naruto's last thought before passing out was, this guy is really cool. Kakashi poofed into nothing when Itachi pointed at him. Itachi felt a kunai against his throat. You will not take Naruto or corrupt Sasuke. Itachi gave a ha. What makes you think I have not already done that? Kakashi was forced to refocus on Hinata and Sasuke. The man felt a stabbing pain in his side for his trouble. Sasuke ran towards his teacher and the strange man. His single Koma Sharingan reinforced the knowledge that the opponent he was running towards was very strong, but knew there wasn't much else he could do. He was suddenly aware that Hinata was right behind him but had no time to say anything. Sasuke pulled out a kunai and jumped into the air to attack from above. The black-robed man threw his teacher at him. Sasuke was forced to catch the injured Jonin. At the moment that her sensei was obstructing the enemy's view, Hinata put a burst of speed and moved along the ground and kicked the man from below. The Akatsuki member blocked the blow with his leg but felt something burn along his chakra system. The sensation of 100 hammers hit his leg. Itachi glared his Sharingan at the girl below him. Hinata was fortunate that she was not looking at the man but rather his chakra system. It saved her from several genjutsus Itachi tried to ensnare in. Hinata thrust a hand forward and several pulses of chakra burst from her hands. Itachi never saw something like it and quickly tried to gain some distance. The milliseconds in contact with those dangerous hands and feet caused large amounts of swelling and Itachi looked at his bare arm. A bruise was swelled so much it began to bleed. For that he decided the girl would die. He looked to her and realized she was gone. He turned to his right and heard, "I am on your left, you idiot." Hinata was several feet away from him but her hands sent long narrow pulses of chakra. Itachi was forced to block with his kunai when he saw someone coming in on his right to fight Kisame and his little brother charging him from behind. Itachi was about to direct himself to his brother when he felt the stings of those chakra bullets he thought he deflected seep through the kunai and pass into his chakra system. He recognized that those bursts were focusing on his system when he saw the girl's eyes. Itachi threw a kunai at his brother only to see it caught in mid-air and thrown back at him. He smiled when he saw his little brother perform a high-power fire jutsu. But that smile faded when he saw that there were wires holding him to the ground. He almost swore when he saw several thin wires grow taut around his body. Itachi realized when he looked to his right, he should not have looked away to the girl's taunt. He did not see his brother attach slack wires to his legs. Itachi braced himself for a fire jutsu. It covered his body and burned away most of his clothes. The bamboo hat flew off his head and when the first began to fade, he felt hundreds of bursts in his chakra system and knew his Sharingan failed to remain active. It would be the first time in years his eyes would see in the same way he was born into. Itachi snapped several wires and looked to his brother. The boy was panting along with the dangerous girl. When Sasuke looked up, he felt several kinds of terrors. Fear gripped him and memories that he thought he dealt with long ago were brought back in full force. Itachi studied his brother. It was just enough for his brother to see him again. "You have grown strong, Sasuke." Itachi heard a shout and already understood they needed to retreat. He saw out of the corner of his eye that Heikate Kakashi was standing and Kisame was fighting another Jonin he recognized. Itachi smirked at his little brother. He felt enough chakra in his hand and activated a fear jutsu. "See you soon, little brother." Itachi disappeared along with Kisame. Guy looked at their retreating backs and ran to Kakashi. "My eternal rival, are you not damaged? I knew your flames would not extinguish from such a fight." Kakashi was in more shock that Guy was there. He held his hand to his side and kept the kunai embedded in his side to plug the wound. "Guy, get Naruto, I'll check on these two." Hinata and Sasuke were still stuttering from the fear stimuli Itachi used. Kakashi winced in pain from the kunai and said softly, "It's okay. Come back to us, Hinata, Sasuke. You still have friends who care for you. The world is not over, and your worst nightmares have not come true. You are alive." Hinata began to respond. Her eyes began to slow their tears. Kakashi lowered his headband back over his eye. Hinata, please look at me. Naruto and Sasuke are both safe and alive. Your family is safe in Konoha, and you have just had a rough mission. Please look at me. Hinata slowly blinked and began to shake but nodded at her teacher. She tried to stand but fell back over again. It's okay, Hinata, just rest. She nodded and let herself lay down. Kakashi looked over to Sasuke. In a sterner voice, the Jonin said, Sasuke. You fought him. You fought your brother. All you see right now are just memories. You know they are already dead. Sasuke whimpered with blank eyes. Kakashi's voice softened. But Hinata and Naruto are fine. Look to your left. Sasuke followed the sound of the commanding voice. The Uchiha gave a relived sob before losing balance and falling onto Hinata. He gripped her and just cried in relief. Kakashi patted the boy's head. We are all alive. You both did an amazing job today. Rest. Within moments, both genin were asleep from exhaustion. Team 7's instructor looked up in time to see Ayanbu and Medical Ninja arrive. Several were afraid when they felt the Kyuubi chakra, but when they saw the boy passed out and stained blood on his shirtless torso, they immediately checked on him. Kakashi smiled slightly. Trust a medical ninja to not worry about social taboos. Naruto stayed silent in his bed while the doctor said he could be signed out. When the doctor left, he dressed with some clothes that his teacher sent for him. He looked out the window and smiled slightly. That man and Kakashi were standing on a roof watching his room. He waved to them and they waved back. Naruto left his room. Two Chunins nodded to the boy before they left now that their duty was fulfilled. Naruto looked around and saw Hinata's name and Sasuke's name. He was surprised they shared the same room, not too much, when he saw that the room was a wing. It held 12 beds and both of theirs were next to the door. Naruto moved the curtain and saw that both of them were sleeping. He lowered his gaze. It is a hard blow for him to know that these two were placed in danger because of him. Unsure if they could hear him, he felt he needed to say something now or he would never do it. Sasuke, Hinata. He looked away from their sleeping forms. Look, I know it was unfair to keep something like this from you until we were on the mission, and I heard you two did good even though you are in here. Naruto shuffled his feet, still trying to find the right words. This thing. Naruto patted his stomach. It's a part of me. Those guys are a part of my life. I am the demon container for Kyuubi. I use his powers to stay alive. I use my own power to be a ninja. There will always be guys like that no matter where I go or how I live. I don't want you to have to accept it, just know it. Naruto rubbed his neck. Finally, he looked at their sleeping bodies. This is who I am. Naruto left now that he felt he said all he needed to say. 10 minutes passed and Hinata rose up from her bed. She ached all over but ignored it. Did you hear it all, Sasuke? Sasuke still felt shivers from his encounter with his brother. He put them aside and thought of how he saw Naruto using the Kyuubi power. Every word. We may begin in Team 7, but we are also friends. Yeah, we are. We just have to remind him that every chance we get. Sasuke finally let himself relax again and he was asleep. Hinata smiled at the boy and looked at the door Naruto left out of. She murmured his name before deciding she needed to rest too. Naruto stared at the half-rolled scroll that Temari never intended to send. He wondered about it since Gaara told him she had tried and failed to send him something. Naruto felt guilty. He never thought of writing to none of the siblings. Finally, he opened the letter and read. Hey, Naruto. It's Temari. I don't know if I'll ever send you this, but I just wanted to say I miss you. You are a good friend. You think of your friends before yourself. I miss how you can be so upbeat even when you have so many troubles. And when I had a bad day, you didn't even need to try and cheer me up. You just talked for a few seconds, and I was smiling again. Right me? Oh, and thank you for the pillow. I never did tell you that. Lots of hugs, Temari. A grin split Naruto's face. He couldn't help it. Everything that he did with Temari, from kissing her to making her turn red, came back. Every fond memory rolled over the boy. He read the letter several times before he left Sasuke's home, his home. He laughed and ran through the town. He arrived at the hospital again. Sasuke and Hinata were in there for several days, but it would be several more before they were able to leave. Naruto waved at the lady at the front desk, wrote his name at the clipboard in front, and ran up the stairs towards his friend's wing. They smiled at him, and were immediately relieved at Naruto's mood. He slowly tumbled everything he experienced when he was at the village hidden in the sands. Sasuke and Hinata listened and slowly began to understand the enormity of the jobs Naruto completed without the blonde himself understanding how important those jobs were. Finally, Naruto ended the story with Temari's kiss and the letter. Hinata gave him a look. It reminded him of when Temari didn't approve of something. But it didn't last long. There was a knock at the door and Naruto turned to see the man in green. Oh! Cool green guy man. Miyato guy smiled radiantly. Ah, the students of my rival Kakashi. I just wanted to see how you were all doing. But seeing how Uzumaki Naruto is fully recovered, I can say his fires of youth burn brightly. Naruto smiled at him and flexed his arm. I am as bright as the sun. He shouted. Hinata giggled and Sasuke smiled. It was the first real laugh they had got from their stay at the hospital. Guy looked at the two and smiled. Your passionate nature saw you through such trails. And to be so honest with yourself and others like the way you did when the medic ninjas arrived makes me envious, young man. Guy smiled proudly at Sasuke. Sasuke reddened but nodded his thanks. Hinata looked at the man, unsure what he would say to her. And here is the angel of your team. No doubt your abilities rival those of the strongest of ninjas. Hinata blushed and smiled. Kakashi looked at the group around his book and murmured out. Flatterer. Naruto saw Kakashi and screamed. You are still reading that pervy book. Kakashi looked at him with a hint of bemusement. What made you think I would stop reading it? Naruto glared at his teacher. Guy! Can you be out, sensei? I bet you are a better teacher than Kakashi-sensei. You are so cool. Hinata smiled and looked at Sasuke. Hinata shouted out. Yes! Please be out, new sensei, you are amazing. Sasuke laughed to himself. You are my hero, Guy-sensei. Guy laughed loudly. He told them repeatedly he could not be their teacher and only gave them tips to be as hip as he was. Kakashi looked at his team with annoyance. Ingrates. Kisame set his sword down and thought back to the week's events. This has been very interesting week. When the time comes, I look forward to fighting Naruto and Miyato Guy again. Itachi remained silent while he replaced his bandages. Ah, what's wrong, Itachi? You have been quiet for ages. Itachi glared at his partner. But the shark man did not back down. I am frustrated, Kisame. Kisame looked at his acquaintance. Itachi growled out, I have found someone I need to kill before they get too dangerous, but find myself unable to do so. Kisame looked at Itachi and thought about it. Not your brother, his little girlfriend? Itachi scowled more. That is as close of an approximation that you will get for his age. I looked into my brother's soul. What I saw frustrated and amazed me. Kisame sat still. He liked listening to Itachi when he explained how he sees. I didn't just felt it, I didn't just see it. I knew my brother's future. I can see him as a full-grown man. He is well beyond what I can see myself becoming. But to have my brother become that man, I need to have that girl with her dangerous fighting become the woman she is meant to be. Kisame was still confused. What, they fall in love or something? Itachi shook his head. It's more than that. We know that Naruto supposedly saved my brother and made him stronger. But that isn't true. Uzumaki Naruto may have been the trigger, but the girl was the source. The girl is so essential to who my brother is, and who he will become, that if I kill her now, I will never see the true form of the Sharingan. I will never see the white wheel. Kisame wondered at that but remained silent while his partner continued to bandage himself. Naruto stood in front of the two Hokages with his team. A month passed since their duel mission. The C-ranked one was a success, and the both Hokages deemed that the run-in with the two Akatsuki members was a completed S-ranked mission just by their survival. The group looked at a very serious Tsunade and a very grim Sarutobi. The Sandai finally started the meeting. Due to the nature of the extreme situation your team finds itself in, and your own determination to remain together. Hinata smiled widely. It was not hard to convince her father to stay on Team 7, but the elders of the clan were very upset that she took on the equivalent of an S-rank mission as a genin. We have decided to send you on an extended mission to ensure that you are all at a sufficient level where such circumstances like your previous mission are ones you can survive. As a result, Team 7 will be placed on Fire Country Daimyo security detail for the foreseeable future. When your teacher, Heike Kakashi, determines you are prepared, you will return to Konoha and demonstrate your abilities to reassure us and the Council of Elders that you are able to sufficiently protect yourselves and others from the threats that target you. Sasuke and Hinata were glaring at the orders. Kakashi thought he should do a few things before leaving. Naruto stayed quiet for a moment. When he opened his mouth, Hinata interrupted him. The orders mean we go away until we are strong enough to handle those guys that we fought without Jonin help. Naruto tilted his head in understanding and nodded. That's good. If we are strong enough, we don't have to worry about them at all. Sasuke and Hinata gave a helpless laugh. Tsunade smiled. You are all to leave tomorrow at noon. Security detail at the capital is expecting you there in 2 days at nightfall. Kakashi turned and left with his team following him. As the door closed, Hinata gave a frustrated growl. Those bastards. Sasuke smiled at her. It's going to be okay. We'll just show them that they can't get rid of us that easily. Right, Naruto? Naruto nodded. Sasuke pulled his back over his back. Naruto, I am going ahead. I'll get Hinata and meet you at the south gate. Naruto just hummed while looking at the blank scroll. Finally, he sighed and started writing. Temari, it's Naruto. It was great to read a letter from you. Seeing some part of you, even if it's just writing, brought back all the good times I had there. I miss them. I am going away on a long mission. I don't know when I'll get back, but I'll write as soon as I get back. Thanks for reminding me that there is more to my life than just Konoha. Tell Gaara and Kankuro I am having fun and am doing good. I think I found a guy who's really cool and so much has happened. I don't have much time left to write. We are about to leave for my mission now. Long hug Temari-chan and a kiss on the cheek. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you enjoyed this what if and want to see next part of it, comment down below and let me know. Also share this video with your friends. See you in the next video. Peace.